Hello, this is Tim from Vintage RC Garage. Today we're going to do an unboxing of the Tamiya Clod Buster kit number 5865. The Clod Buster is a 1/10 scale monster truck and was originally released in September of 1987 and was last manufactured in 2003. The Clod Buster was a very unique kit. It was the first monster truck RC created by Tamiya and the first in general that kickstarted a monster truck craze across all RC enthusiasts. It became popular because it was a true scale monster truck that only Tamiya could create. It had four-wheel drive with four massive 165mm tires. It had four-wheel steering, which was the first Tamiya kit to have all-wheel steering. To drive those four large tires, it also had dual RS 540 motors and dual gearboxes, one on each axle. To complete the monster truck look, the Clod had 8 huge shocks and a Chevy truck shell that was a scale replica of the 1980s Chevrolet pickup trucks. The original version had a Chevy logo on the front grille. The Chevrolet name was also placed on the tailgate and on the black strip on the decals. At some point in the 90s, Tamiya and Chevrolet had a falling out and the Chevy branding was completely removed from the Clod Buster. For this reason, the Chevy version of the Clod is a very sought-after version for collectors. My version, however, is the newer version that lacks the Chevy branding. The Bullhead was released in 1990, an almost identical version of the Clod Buster. It only differed with a yellow parts tree versus the red parts tree in the Clod, chrome rims, and a semi-body truck shell. There are 4 re-releases of the Clod Buster, all a variation of the Super Clod Buster that was first released in 2004. Alrighty, let's jump into the box and see what we have. Let's start with the A parts tree. Unfortunately, some of the tree parts in the bags have been separated from their trees, so they're not in very good shape. The A parts tree has the electronics tray, the front and rear body mount post crossbars, battery holder ends, servo access door, and the steering servo mount plate. The C parts tree has 2 duplicate trees. It includes the front and rear body mount posts, the long sway bars, the sway bar axle attachment, which is 2 parts that attach to the longer sway bar, the battery holder inserts, and the throttle servo mount. The B parts tree also has 2 duplicate trees, the left and right gearbox, the engine stabilizer, the engine mount, the steering throttle servo heads, the upper and lower servo saver halves for both servos, and lastly the tire rim axle adapters. The F parts tree contains all red parts. Like the C and B parts tree, it also has 2 tree parts. In these 2 parts are front and rear bumpers and attachment rods, sway bar chassis stabilizers, gear assembly steering rod ball connectors, and the spring shock top, bottom, and cylinders. The Clod has front and rear trailing arm suspension paired with coil springs, not oil-filled dampers. The H parts tree bag has also the G and K parts tree in it. And the G parts tree has all white parts including the tailgate, the bottom grille, the roll bar light covers, and the roll bar bed supports. And in the K parts tree are all clear parts that include the front headlights. In the H parts tree, there's the chrome parts, including the second roll bar, the engine intake, the front grille, the roll bar light backs, and the roll bar attachment clips. In the J parts tree has the front chrome bumper and the rear chrome bumper. The windshield is on its own. It's one piece that covers the front and side windows as well as the entire sunroof. Next up is the body shell. The shell was slightly yellowed in my version. It contains cutouts for front and side windows, sunroof, front grille area, and the rear tailgate area. The body is a classic Chevy 80s pickup replica. The Chevrolet branding was removed in the later production versions. The chassis is the workhorse of the entire kit. It contains holders for many ball connectors, the 8 shocks, the servos, and the bumpers. The Clod uses a single chassis mounted servo to control the 4-wheel steering. When fully assembled, the Clod is over 9.5 pounds. Moving on to the D parts tree. It also has 2 tree parts, each with 2 wheel hubs on them. Each tree is a slight variation of each other, and they have different variations of the wheel hubs on the front and the back to accommodate the steering. On its own, we have the primary chrome roll bar. No vintage kit would be complete without the standard clear Tamiya antenna. It wouldn't be a monster truck if it wasn't for the huge monster tires. For some reason, my set had chrome rims installed when I got it. These rims are not from the Clod Buster. The chrome version rims were only supplied on the Bullhead and the Super Clod Buster. These tires, though, are still in perfect shape, soft and pliable. The blister pack contains a majority of the parts. It has two 540 engines, the mechanical speed controller, the ceramic resistor. The kit included ball bearings, 4 wheel axles, 4 drive shafts, 2 13-tooth pinion gears, 1 for each motor, the slide switch, the counter shafts, and the ball connector bag. The ball connector bag has servo saver collars, wheel hubs, 6mm ball connectors, 8mm ball connectors, 6mm ball connector nuts, and bevel joints. Inside the blister pack contained the 4 original Clod Buster white rims. Inside on the E-parts tree has a pair of left and right axle housings that attach to the gearbox with 4 screws each. The rod bag has 8 spring shock coils, 2 servo saver springs, speed controller rod and adapter, and 3mm steering rods in 60, 132, and 140mm lengths. The gear bag contains the differential spur gear, small bevel gears, large bevel gears, 50T counter gear, 44T counter gear, also a second set for the second axle. In the tool bag contains the metal bearings, body clips, zip ties, grease, switch lubricant, rubber tubing for the shocks, green and black motor wires, the pinion gear tool, and the box wrench. Alright, moving on to the press parts bag. It contains 2 L-shaped stays for attaching the grille and the tailgate, the resistor plate and grate, a short and long pair of axle stays that stabilize the axle to the gearbox, and ball plates for attaching the sway bars. In the metal parts bag, you get 14mm shafts for the small bevel gears, 8 shock tubes, 4 engine spacers, 8 5mm ball connectors, 4 15mm step screws, and 8 damper shafts. The Clod Buster has a lot of screws and nuts that need to be put together. In the screw bag A, all of which are 3mm machine screws, they come in the following lengths: 16 at 6mm, 10 at 10mm, 22 at 12mm, 14 at 15mm, 14 at 20mm, 10 at 27mm, and 8 at 30mm. In screw bag B, 43, yes 43, 3mm by 12mm self-tapping screws, 38, 3mm by 8mm self-tapping screws, 2 3mm by 30mm bolts, 54 3mm flange nuts. I told you this kit had lots and lots of screws and nuts. In screw bag C, you have 50, you heard it, 50 3mm nuts, 2 3mm lock nuts, 16 3mm washers, 4mm locking nuts for the tires, 4mm flange nuts, and 4mm washers. In screw bag D, we have 10 2mm by 8mm machine screws that are used to connect the front grille and tailgate to the body shell, 3mm grub screws, 2mm nuts, 2mm washers, 6mm washers, 5mm E-rings for the gearbox and shafts, and 16 plastic bearings that you should just upgrade to ball bearings to save yourself some trouble. Next, we have the infamous manual. The manual is the standard Tamiya version provided with English titles with Japanese and other language subtitles. It uses monochrome print with occasional blue highlights throughout. My version was very beat up. I'm not sure what the original owner did to it. It is very yellowed and the top and bottom pages were badly dog-eared. Last up are the decals. The decals in this box are not the Chevy version. The Clod's decals include smiley faces for the roll bar light covers, a Mudbog California license plate, 4x4x4 lettering that goes on the chassis, and the Clod Man breaking rocks on the sides of the truck. There are numerous black and orange strips that go on the rear bed truck and tailgate. When compared to today's monster trucks, the Clod was not a great truck. The steering is terrible, it's not fast, it does not have independent suspension, and it does not come with oil-filled dampers. But it was the beginning of a craze before its time and the scale monster truck look that could only be pulled off by Tamiya. Thanks for watching my unboxing of the Tamiya Clod Buster. If you have a request for my next unboxing, visit my blog collection page at vintagercgarage.com and send me a note. See you next time.